All right, so let's dive into this world, the world of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I mean, obviously, everyone knows him, right? Sherlock Holmes. But there's just so much more to this guy that I think we need to kind of dig into. So today, we're going to explore, well, all of it. The breadth of his work, his life, and all those little quirks and contradictions that make him such an interesting, well, figure in history.
Yeah, and I think what really grabs you about Doyle is that his life is almost like one of his adventure stories.
Yeah.
He wasn't just a writer, he was a doctor, an athlete, even like a champion of justice in real life cases. I mean, all of that stuff, his experiences, his interests, all find their way into his writing. So it's like all these layers and like this authenticity that just comes through.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. We all know Sherlock Holmes, but you mentioned other works. So what else did he write?
Well, Doyle's work goes way beyond just Victorian London and Baker Street, right?
Right.
He wrote historical novels like Micah Clarke, which is set during the Monmouth Rebellion, and The White Company, which is all about medieval warfare. And then there's the science fiction stuff, right? You got Professor Challenger leading expeditions into the Lost World, which is it's like Jurassic Park, but written way earlier, dinosaurs and all that. And he even created this character, Brigadier Gerard, who's like this kind of funny, kind of bumbling Napoleonic soldier.
Wow, that's a huge range.
Yeah.
It's like he had a whole library of stories just waiting to be told.
Yeah.
But it all started with medicine, right? I mean, he was a doctor before he's a writer, a full-time writer anyway.
Absolutely, yeah. Doyle's medical training had a really, I think, significant impact on his writing, especially when it came to Sherlock Holmes. The character's powers of observation, deduction, all that. That was actually inspired by one of Doyle's professors, a guy named Joseph Bell, who was like renowned for his diagnostic skills.
So is Joseph Bell, was he like a real-life Sherlock Holmes?
You could say that, yeah. Bell was known for observing the tiniest details about his patients. And then he would just make these like incredibly accurate deductions about their lives, their illnesses. It's amazing, really. And it's funny, Robert Louis Stevenson, Treasure Island, right? After we read A Study in Scarlet, he said that Sherlock Holmes reminded him of his old friend Joe Bell.
That's pretty high praise, I'd say. It seems like Doyle's life was full of these fascinating connections and influences.
Yeah.
But I want to shift gears a bit here.
Mm-hmm.
Something that caught my eye. Doyle's, well, his passion for these miniature rifle clubs. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, sure. So Doyle's advocacy for these clubs, it stemmed from his experiences during the Second Boer War. He served as a volunteer physician. And while witnessing war firsthand, and particularly the shortcomings in the British Army's marksmanship, it led him to believe in accessible training for everyone.
So these clubs weren't just about, sport shooting. They were tied into, national preparedness,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly, yeah. Doyle saw them as a way to ensure that citizens could defend themselves and their country. So it reflects this concern for national defense that went beyond his writing, it was a personal belief.
It's interesting how his experiences, personal and professional, shaped his views. But let's not forget, Doyle wasn't just a doctor and a writer. He was quite the athlete, too. I mean, goalkeeper for Portsmouth AFC under a pseudonym, and a cricketer. He even bowled out W.G. Grace. That's incredible.
It is. It's amazing. And what's even more striking is his enthusiasm, right? He didn't just dabble. He was all in. Whether it was writing poetry about his cricket achievements or, get this, considering traveling to referee a boxing match, he embraced life with, a remarkable amount of passion and energy.
It makes you wonder, did he ever sleep? But speaking of passion, one aspect of Doyle's life that I find really interesting is, his architectural side. Designing his own home, contributing to a hotel expansion. Where did that come from?
Well, Doyle's interest in architecture, though less known, speaks to his many sides. He believed that a well-designed home could contribute to a person's well-being, It's a detail that often gets overlooked, but it reveals a lot about him. He appreciated beauty and functionality, not just in his stories, but in his real life, too.
It really does paint a picture of, a Renaissance man,
Yeah.
Someone with endless curiosity and, a drive to explore different things. But even with all these achievements and passions, life wasn't always, sunshine and roses for Doyle, was it? Tell me about his first marriage to Louisa Hawkins.
Doyle's marriage to Louisa, it was full of both joy and sorrow. She suffered from tuberculosis for many years, and it cast a shadow over their lives. Her death in 1906, it really affected him deeply. And it was actually during this period of grief that his interest in spiritualism really began to grow.
And this is where things get really interesting, right? Because it seems like such a shift for the creator of Sherlock Holmes, all logic and reason, to certainly delve into the supernatural. But before we explore that further, I think we need to talk about this unconventional love story that happened during this tragedy.
Absolutely. While Louisa was still alive, Doyle developed a deep connection with Jane Leckey, who he would later marry. Their relationship, it started as a platonic friendship out of respect for Louisa, but it eventually became something more. It's complicated, a delicate situation, and it really reflects the norms of Victorian society and the personal struggles that they faced. It really does raise some interesting questions, about love and loss and just the expectations of Victorian society. I mean, it was a time of such strict social conventions, and yet here's this guy grappling with these really personal emotions, all while caring for his wife.
It's a good reminder that even those who seem, well, larger than life, like Doyle, they experience the same things as everyone else. But I want to circle back to that shift you mentioned, the one towards spiritualism, because it seems so paradoxical, right?
Yeah.
The creator of this, super rational detective suddenly embracing the seemingly irrational.
Yeah.
So what was it? What drove that change?
Doyle's journey into spiritualism, it was a process, really. It was gradual, and it was influenced by a few things, I think. He had always been, well, I guess, fascinated by the mystical, the unexplained. He even dabbled in psychic investigations early in his career. But it was the loss of his loved ones, especially Louisa, his wife, and then his son, Kingsley, in World War I, that really made that interest, I guess, intensify. His search for, well, solace and meaning, I guess you could say, beyond just the material world.
So the war, with all its loss of life, the shattering of so many beliefs, it created a space for spiritualism to take hold.
Absolutely. The Victorian era was a time of, well, huge scientific advancement, obviously, but also this social and spiritual upheaval. People were questioning, well, everything. Traditional religion, Darwin's theory of evolution, and I think they were searching for answers. And spiritualism, with its, promise of communicating with the dead, a glimpse into the afterlife, well, it offered hope, comfort in a world that felt very uncertain.
It's interesting how these larger societal shifts played a part in shaping Doyle's beliefs, his personal beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
But his embrace of spiritualism, it went beyond just personal solace, right? He became like a real advocate for it.
He did, yeah. He truly believed that he had found something like a new revelation, a message of hope that could change the world. He wrote books, gave lectures, even went on international tours, sharing his experiences and promoting this newfound faith. He was, well, very convicted.
And this is where the Cottingley fairies photographs come in, right?
Mm-hmm. Ah, yes, the fairies. This whole episode, it really highlights Doyle's sincerity, but also, well, some might say a certain naivete. These two young girls, Elsie Wright and Frances Griffiths, they claim to have photographed fairies in their garden. And Doyle, well, he was so eager for proof of the supernatural that he embraced those photos completely as, genuine evidence. He even featured them in his book, The Coming of the Fairies.
It's kind of hard to imagine the creator of Sherlock Holmes, the master of logic and deduction, being taken in by what turned out to be, well, a hoax. What do you make of that?
It's really interesting. I think it shows just how complex belief can be. Doyle was so convinced of the truth of spiritualism that he didn't even consider the possibility of deception. He wanted to believe.
Yeah.
And that desire, I think, combined with, well, the limits of photography back then, made him, well, susceptible to the allure of the impossible.
It's a good reminder that even the most brilliant minds can be influenced by their beliefs, by their desires. And speaking of, well, fascinating relationships, Doyle's friendship and eventual falling out with Harry Houdini, it's another example of this clash between belief and skepticism.
Yeah, their relationship is, well, fascinating. You've got these two larger-than-life figures, masters of their crafts, coming together and then, well, clashing over this question of the supernatural. Houdini, the master illusionist, was very much a skeptic, He believed that mediums were exploiting people's grief, using tricks to deceive.
And Doyle, of course, saw it very differently.
Yeah.
He believed Houdini himself had supernatural powers, right?
He did. He really did. Doyle was convinced that Houdini's escapes, his illusions, they couldn't just be tricks. He thought Houdini was using psychic abilities, even writing about it in The Edge of the Unknown.
I can only imagine those conversations. Houdini trying to explain his techniques and Doyle attributing it all to something, well, beyond explanation.
Yeah, and those differing viewpoints, they ultimately led to a very public and pretty nasty split. It really shows you how strongly held beliefs can create these divides, even between people who respect and admire each other.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even when faced with evidence, our beliefs, they really shape how we see and interpret the world. But let's shift gears again. I want to talk about a different side of Doyle, one that often gets kind of lost in the shuffle, amidst all the fairies and magicians. His work is, well, as a champion of justice.
Yeah, Doyle's commitment to justice, it went way beyond Sherlock Holmes. He was deeply troubled by miscarriages of justice in the real world, and he felt this need to use his platform, his skills to fight for those he believed were wrongly convicted.
So he actually, like, played detective in real life.
He did, and he was pretty good at it. He took on several cases, examining evidence, challenging police procedures, advocating for the innocent. It was remarkable.
Are there any cases that stand out?
Two really notable ones are the cases of George Adalji and Oscar Slater. Adalji, he was a young solicitor, Parsi descent, and he was accused of these animal mutilations and sending threatening letters. Doyle, he was convinced that Adalji was innocent, and so he took up his case, highlighting the flaws in the investigation and the prejudice against Adalji because of his ethnicity.
And was he successful? Did he prove Adalji's innocence?
He was instrumental in securing a pardon for Adalji, though not a full exoneration. But Doyle's work, it went beyond just that one case. It exposed the weaknesses in the legal system, and his advocacy helped pave the way for the creation of the Court of Criminal Appeal in 1907.
So his impact, it went way beyond one single case. He helped create lasting change, in the system itself. That's incredible.
It really is. And then there's the Oscar Slater case. Slater was convicted of murdering an elderly woman in Glasgow, and Doyle was convinced that the investigation was biased. The evidence against him was flimsy. So Doyle spent years researching the case, even wrote a book arguing for Slater's innocence.
So he really used his writing as a tool for social change, bringing attention to these injustices.
Absolutely, yeah. His platform as a well-known author, it gave him a voice, a powerful voice, and he used it to challenge the status quo and fight for those he believed in. And after nearly 20 years of campaigning, Slater's conviction was finally overturned.
That's amazing. It's remarkable how he took those same principles, the logic, the deduction that made Sherlock Holmes so famous, and applied it to real-life situations, fighting for justice, exposing the flaws in the system.
It really is. It speaks to his character, his belief in fairness, his willingness to use his influence to make a real difference. And it reminds us that Doyle wasn't just a writer of fiction. He was a man of action, engaged with the world around him.
It's so interesting how Doyle's life was just this mix of everything: creativity, advocacy, these huge personal journeys. He was a man of contradictions,
Yeah.
embracing logic and mysticism, fighting for justice, but also delving into the supernatural. As we kind of wrap up this deep dive, I keep coming back to this question. How do we reconcile the creator of Sherlock Holmes, the epitome of reason, with Doyle's, his really strong belief in spiritualism?
Yeah, it's a question that people are still, kind of debating today, scholars and just, fans. On the surface, it does seem like a contradiction. I mean, Sherlock Holmes, with that sharp mind, that scientific approach, he would have laughed at, seances and mediums. But his creator, he embraced all that.
Yeah, it's almost like two sides of the same coin, reason and faith existing like side by side in Doyle's world.
Maybe instead of seeing it as a contradiction, we could see it as a reflection of, just how complicated human experience is. I mean, Doyle, like a lot of people in that era, they were dealing with, so many things. These big scientific advancements, the horrors of war, loss of loved ones. And spiritualism, with its promise of an afterlife, communication with those who've passed on, it offered something that science couldn't. It offered comfort and meaning.
So instead of dismissing it as totally irrational, maybe we can see his belief in spiritualism as a way of, coping with the uncertainties, the anxieties of the time.
Right, exactly. And if we really look closely at Sherlock Holmes, we see these hints of, those same questions, those big existential questions kind of lurking there under the surface.
Yeah.
I mean, Holmes, even with his brilliance and his logic, he was a really complex character. He struggled with loneliness, sought comfort in music and art, the beauty of nature.
So maybe Doyle, through Holmes, was exploring all these different facets of being human, that tension between logic and faith, the desire for knowledge, and also that need for comfort when faced with, the unknown.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it, and maybe that's why Doyle's work is still so powerful today. He wasn't afraid to embrace those contradictions, to explore both the rational and the mystical, to really engage with the complexities of life, and the human condition.
Yeah, and in doing so, he gave us this body of work that still captivates us. It still makes us think, sparks debate, and invites us to dig deeper into well, into the mysteries of the world and ourselves.
Well said. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, but also so much more. A doctor, an athlete, a social activist, and, well, a seeker of truth. His life and his work, they offer us a window into a really fascinating time, and they remind us that even the most contradictory parts of a person can coexist, and contribute to a truly rich legacy.
What a what a journey this has been, from Victorian London to the lost world of dinosaurs, from courtroom battles to seances and the search for answers beyond the veil. We've explored the life and work of a man who, well, he just defied categories. He left behind a legacy that, well, it still sparks our curiosity and keeps the debate alive.
Absolutely. And to everyone listening, I encourage you to, well, keep exploring the world of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Read his lesser-known works, revisit those Sherlock Holmes adventures, and really think about his spiritualist beliefs. There's always more to discover, more to question, and more to appreciate about this, well, this amazing man.
So until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep those questions coming, and as Sherlock Holmes himself would say, the game is afoot.